So this is Ember from Ember Talks, and I wanted to talk a little bit, just sharing my experience about how I made it from floor 1 to Celestial in 3 months. My first 3 months of gameplay, I managed to make it to Celestial floor, and I kind of just want to, sort of make a video just giving a breakdown of all the floors and more or less the challenges I found myself facing on each of them, and strategies that I can provide you to help overcome them, and just kind of what to know going through each of the floors. So anyways, moving on to the next slide here. First steps. So first steps when you're first starting the game, and this was like around my first month too, you want to spend a lot of time in missions. I went through every single one of the missions. I tried to skip as few of them as possible, because I just felt like they were all relevant to the game. I tried to spend at least 20 hours in the lab before hopping into any matches, even with friends, which I think in some ways was a detriment, and in other ways was not. I think picking up the skill of labbing and learning how to use the lab, I think, is very important. So yes, spending time in the lab, and I did lab for at least 20 hours before going into any online matches. Like even with friends, even in friend rooms and player rooms and anything. I think it was more so a pride thing. There's a lot of anxiety and pressure around doing online matches. But at some point, I think it's good. I would recommend for most new players to hop into it sooner than the 20 hours that I did. I think it was very detrimental to me, because you actually want to get as much games in as early as possible against online players, whether it be through rank, through parks, or extended sets with friends. So that way you get exposure to an opponent's pressure, to another player's pressure, and that sort of gives you an idea of how to deal with it. So also figure out which controller you want to use, because this was a difficulty I faced, because when I first started in the beginning, I started playing with fight stick. So with a fight stick, it's literally just like an arcade stick, right? And I found myself just, no matter how much I practice, I just kept messing up inputs over and over again, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And someone gave me the suggestion to try pad, specifically the PS5 controller, because the fact that the directional buttons are very big, and it's only 4 buttons. So it's 4 buttons. It's not like the 8. I think it's 8 that you would get from an arcade stick, right? So there's less room to mess up, basically. That's sort of the theory, right? So I picked up the controller, and I found myself, I'm like, okay, it was a bit more to learn. I had to give myself another week or two of buffer room to relearn the muscle memory there. But I actually found myself picking up things faster, found myself messing up inputs less. So become familiarized with which controller you want to use from the get. And this is something some people might switch, to something else later, whether it be hitbox or whatever. You can certainly switch this later on as you get more experience, but ideally, when you're first starting out, you want to have an idea of which controller you want to be comfortable with for a while. Yeah, I just went straight into play with friends and got my ass kicked. That's exactly what you should be doing, Dosh. Like, I think that's really important to do from the beginning, and that's not what I did, and I think it was actually detrimental to myself. So I would say commit to one character when you're first starting out. Obviously, take plenty of time to, get familiar with the roster, try different characters, but eventually you want to settle onto one character, especially if you want to, say, progress fast. In the ranking system, or if you want to get to Celestial fast. Obviously, you want to commit to one character. You don't want to get yourself too distracted. And yeah, pick a character. And again, you want to pick a character you can enjoy labbing with. Pick a character that you can enjoy labbing with. That's a very important point that I always drive home to everybody. So, like, you want to have a character that you can hop onto lab and just have a ball. Just fucking around with them. Just trying to figure out, like, okay, what can I do with this? What can I do with this into this? Or what can I do in this scenario? What kind of combo can I pull off with this? You know, just kind of like, just pick a character that you can enjoy fiddling around with and sort of getting familiarized with, of how they work. That's what I would say would be the important point for committing to a character. And I actually did make a video guide on how to pick a main in Guilty Gear Strive. So if you want to use that as a reference, feel free to do that. Fundamentals you must learn, especially in the beginning. So fundamentals you want to learn in the beginning, especially before hopping online. You want to learn motion inputs. So quarter circles, DPs, half circles, etc. Figure out what motion inputs are used with your character and start to lab them out. Now, here's how... Also, thank you for the sub, Rain Sandrew. Appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I've tried a lot of characters just to see how they play and if I like them. Yeah, that's how you do it. You see how they play, see if you like them, and you know, if you like them, you keep playing that character, and if you don't, you move to another character. After trying a few more characters, I'm probably gonna stick with Bridget and Biken. Both great choices. Both great choices, by the way. And both of them, I'm terrible at the matchup for both of them, with Soul. But anyways, so going back to motion inputs. So to learn motion inputs, here's what I did. So you want to lab it out multiple times. So what do I mean by this? So you want to, basically what you want to do is you want to hop in lab. All right? And if you're not familiar with any character motions, you want to practice that motion 20 times in a row. So you basically, when you hop on lab, if you don't know how to do a quarter circle, you want to make it a goal to do a quarter circle move 20 times in a row without messing up. And if you mess up, start from 1. So, you know, when you do a quarter circle, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you mess up, you start again from 1. And if you find yourself getting, you know, quarter circles down 20 times consistently without messing up over and over again, up that number to 40. And if you do that, then up the number to 50. I never went above 50, because it's like at that point, you obviously know how to do it. But what this practice does is that it establishes muscle memory. So you want to establish muscle memory and get a sense of muscle memory for your character and for these motion inputs, because these motion inputs are basically skills that are that can be translated between not just Strive but also in other fighting games as well. So these will be very important to learn. And these fundamentals, you definitely don't want to skimp out on them. You definitely want to take a lot of time on these. So definitely do that 100%. That was my training regimen for that, at least. Fuzzy guards, fuzzy jumps. So you wanna build familiarity with what fuzzies are and how they work. You wanna, you basically want to. I recommend going through missions and going through the tutorials on fuzzy guards and fuzzy jumps. And just practicing that over and over again. You can also kind of practice them in real time, fighting against a friend or something like that, and just sort of getting a feel for how it works. Anti-air, so figure out what your anti-air moves are for your character. Figure out what those anti-airs are, and build familiarity on when you should throw them out. Create scenarios in lab mode, where with aerial attacks, and practice. Typically, with characters in Strive, 6P is a common anti-air move that is pretty broadly applied across most characters. So, like, getting familiar with throwing out 6P when an opponent throws out an aerial attack and building that muscle memory down is very important. Roman cancels. So knowing Roman cancel, so like Roman cancel combos, building familiarity with the color system, with like yellow Roman cancels when you're guarding, red Roman cancels when you're attacking and doing aggressive moves, blue Roman cancels for when you're doing, defensive maneuvers, and purple Roman cancels as well. I didn't include that there, but yeah, purple Roman cancels. You basically want to familiarize yourself with the Roman cancel system and how it works, because that's going to be very important to know later on. Bursts. So you want to know how the burst system works, where your burst meter bar is, how that fills up, and you also want to know what a gold burst is. So a gold burst, so basically like it essentially functions as your reset button. So burst essentially can either function as your reset button if you're caught in a long combo and you need to get out. And you can also use gold bursts as a way to gain meter. So if you run up to an opponent and you hit them with a burst, you can gain meter. You can gain a full range of meter and to use either for Roman cancels or for supers or whatever you want to do. Now, AI testing for floors. So this is the stage. This is essentially what's going to happen once you finished up your training and everything. When you first go into Guilty Gear Strive Ranked, they essentially are going to put you in a match against against an AI, and this AI, essentially depending on how you do against them, dictates which floor you are starting in on. If that makes sense. Also, welcome, Megaton. Appreciate you coming by. But essentially, this AI test will dictate where you start. So, essentially, when I did it, it brought me to floor 6, and I hear that's most people's experience with the AI placement. That with beginners, typically they begin at floor 6. But I heard it. Yeah, it's heard on subreddit. It's usually floor 5 or 6 if you don't lose to the bot. If you lose to the bot, you may end up lower. So if you end up lower, you may have a hard time finding games on your floor. So, something to note on rating update, it shows once you go below floor 6, player availability drops drastically, like from floor 6, from floor 5 and below. That's typically like where I think there's only like 5 to 10% of players or something like that in between all those floors, all of them combined. So basically, like, floors 5 to 1 are pretty desolate. So if you have a hard time finding games, I would say floor 6 is the starting point. And the skill gap won't be too huge between, say, floor 1 or floor 2 and floor 6. So yeah, start at floor 6 if you have trouble finding games on your floor. So floor 6 to 7. So I wanna talk about I kind of want to go over each individual floor and talk about my experience with them, and the challenges I've faced, and more or less what you should be expecting to be learning, what you should be learning in these stages, to move up to the next level, to essentially level up your gameplay. So this is floor 6 to 7, and below. You could say below. It's essentially the learning stage, the button mashing floors. So, like, these are where you can get away with a lot of things. You can get away with a lot of things on these floors. And I think in some ways, it's actually kind of a detriment. Because you are going to end up reinforcing bad habits quite often. Because you're going to be getting away with so much that you would not be able to otherwise in other floors. When you're going through floors 6 and 7, I highly recommend spending extended time in open parks and playing against higher level players, going through extended sets. I usually do a set of like 30, if there's another player out there who will tolerate it. And because that's how you will learn. is by losing. So you wanna go against players that are way better than you, and who will not let you get away with that shit. So that is one thing I will say, is that honestly, a lot of the technique you will be using in these floors to get ahead, um, won't most likely won't be applicable into the higher floors. Um, so yeah, realize what may work for you here may not work on higher floors. And this is something that you can kind of say about most, but is especially true on these floors and lower. Floors 8 and 9. So 8 and 9. So this is where the majority of the player base starts to show up. So most of the player base is floors 8 to 10. So that's where most of the player base in online strive is. So when you get to like floor 8, that's when you're like really starting to kind of get in league with the average player. Because essentially when you get up to floor 10, because essentially how the floor system works is when you go up a floor, you cannot go any lower than 2 floors below that. So you'll get a lot of players who are hard stuck at 10, who may, drop down 2 floors for a little while. So they may end up at 8. So also know that the skill gap is a little higher on these floors because of that. So essentially, these are fundamental stage. So you want to focus on learning fundamentals. Honestly, you don't want to underestimate how complex fundamentals are. You really don't want to underestimate that. So like, go back to missions, retry missions if you have to. Go back to the missions, retry them, go through them again, review, repractice, go through scenarios in lab, that sort of thing. You want to keep doing those things to reinforce those fundamentals, even if it's a fundamental that you think you already have down pat. You may want to just go back and practice it again, especially if you find yourself slipping with certain things going through those bottom floors. Especially like watching replays. Watching replays is very valuable too. Floor 10. So on floor 10, this is where you start really... This is where the skill gap starts really, getting bigger, especially... And especially varies by the time of the month, because of how the Celestial system works, right? So with Celestial, when you go up to the Celestial floor in the beginning, everyone who ends up in Celestial gets kicked back down to floor 10 at the beginning of the month. So at the beginning of the month, everyone's on floor 10. Everyone's on floor 10. And so you'll have a very wide range of player skill present at floor 10, and it's almost it's ridiculous how big the skill gap will grow just playing on floor 10 at the beginning of the month versus playing on floor 10 at the end of the month. So something to bear in mind, it's the skill gap on this floor actually varies heavily depending on the time of the month. So floor 10, you want to focus on like matchups, and obviously continue honing on fundamentals like before, of course. But you want to focus, on these stages is, in order to win, you have to really focus on matchups. You want to focus on how your character interacts with other characters. And you essentially want to learn other characters' weaknesses and other characters' gaps. You want to, be able to work through other characters' block strings. You want to be able to counter hit when you need to counter hit, because otherwise, if you end up mashing or doing whatever, you're just going to get yourself counter hit to death. And that's sort of what ends up happening to a lot of people on this floor. And this was what happened to me a lot of times before I really learned how matchups worked, was that I would just be mashing buttons, trying to get out of combo, trying to throw out a counter hit, and I would just get countered to death. I'll just be fucked. So that's something very important to learn. You want to focus on matchups. You want to focus on your fundamentals if there's anything that you're not grasping. And yeah, fundamentals may be revisited. And as for the Celestial Challenge, so going through the Celestial Challenge, here's my take. Here's my take about the Celestial Challenge. And this is going to be a bit of a spicy one. So, getting there, there's always this talk about the Celestial Challenge, about getting there legitimately, okay? And I'm here to tell you, there's no way to get to the Celestial Challenge legitimately. Like, people will say, like, oh, you know, just play the first 5 matches you find, whatever. But it's like, honestly, it's not, like, if you want to get to, if you want to just, like, get to Celestial quickly, like, you want to cherry pick. You want to cherry pick your matchups. Like, I'm sorry, that's just the way the game's designed. You know, we all know, you know, the ranking system's broke and busted anyways, and the skill gap in Celestial is so fucking huge. You might as well play the game. You know what I mean? So, you know, it does not exist. There is no legitimate way to get there. It's just honestly, like, if you want to get there, by cherry picking your matchups, that's totally valid. That's totally fine. And that doesn't really make it any different from someone else who just hops in and plays the first 5 games they you know, match up in. So, like, yeah, you know, matchup picking, you know, figure out which matchups you work the best against and play against those players. You know, level picking, you know, figure out which characters have really low levels that you want to fight against. Now, granted, sometimes you'll get a Celestial player that, you know, was labbing another character for a while, and, you know, they're, you know, obviously their level's gonna be really low because of that, but, you know, it's just kind of part of that process. You also want to look for other Celestial challengers, so look for other people that are also challenging Celestial, because those people are more likely to be around your skill level, and it would create a more even challenge. It feels so easy to cheese it regardless. I mean, exactly, because it's like, I mean, I think I remember someone told me, like, Hitachi said something along the lines of, like, saying, like, his left nut could get into Celestial, and that's kind of true, because that's his whole point. You know, like, most people who get into Celestial do all of these things. You know, they matchup pick, they level pick, they find other players that are challenging Celestial. You know, it's just like, that's just kind of what you do to get in. You know, that's just kind of what you do to get in. And it's like, cherry picking is okay, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they can go fuck themselves. Because honestly, the opportunity to learn is greater than the pride lost in not getting it in legit. Because here's the thing, and this is the biggest thing about Celestial for me, is the fact that it's essentially, when you get into Celestial, it's essentially Park Plus. You don't get thrown out of Celestial. When you get into Celestial, you don't get thrown out of it, and you have the entire month to play as many rounds as you want. Having the opportunity to go against some of the best players in the world, like, is a much greater thing. Because I've learned so much just playing in Celestial in 1 month than I have, you know, it's just been such a good opportunity for me to learn. Like, I can't recommend it enough. So it's basically Park Plus. Either that, or, like, you could probably get a similar experience getting involved with the Guilty Gear Strive resource Discord and matching up with some of the people there. You know, obviously, the Guilty Gear Strive community is very outgoing, very helpful. So, you know, if you have a hard time getting into Celestial and want to have that benefit, you know, you can always reach out to communities and have someone, you know, to run extended sets with that way. Everyone's been very helpful and kind, so I would definitely recommend that. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. You can subscribe to my YouTube at Ember Talks, or check me out on Twitter at Ember Talks TTV, where you can get my hot Twitter takes. And you can also give me a follow here on twitch.tv/Ember Talks. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sticking around. I really